What's going on, y'all? Just picked up a 7300 Cub Cadet. Not really sure what the year is, but probably put it around like a 2000, 2001. Fairly straight tractor. Got one little ding here. But picked it up with a known problem. Clutch is slipping. Got 1500 hours, but the engine runs like a gem. No blow-by. Very strong. It's really, and the other issue that it has too actually is way down in there. There's a hydraulic line for the power steering that's busted, and it's for the right turn. Yeah, that's all fluid leaking out of that line. So, first thing actually, I was thinking about doing the hydraulic line first, but it's actually just going to make sense to split the tractor by itself, and getting to that hydraulic line will actually be a lot easier. So we're going to tear into it. Looking forward to this one actually. Nice, came with a loader. Got it sitting right over there. Aftermarket loader, Allied, but nice. Bucket is okay. It's got a couple of bends in it, but we'll get it straightened out. Should be fairly straightforward. Everything else works on it. I guess this was actually a business's tractor. So they had it. They were trying to pull a finish mower and do brush hogging with it. Obviously a finish mower is not going to do too well with a brush hog, but I mean, it's straight, but it's got some patina to it, you can tell. So we are probably going to paint it too. The wife kind of convinced me to, so I think I'm just going to jump into it and see where we get. So be back here in a minute. We'll start taking off some of these panels. Pretty easy, at least the side engine covers. Just a couple clips on each side, and then it's just got two posts in the corner that allow it to sit in. So it's just very easy. Pop out. Makes it pretty easy to get to all the serviceable items, filters, dipstick for the engine oil, and everything else. Was missing the radiator cap, so I got to get one of those. But tires are all good. They all hold air. So yeah, 4-wheel drive, power steering, 30 horse, little 3-cylinder diesel. Let's go. All right, got the panels off. The front headlight was actually pretty easy. It's just two little 10mm bolts and two electrical connectors. Surprisingly enough, the headlights actually work for a tractor this age. So I also took off the instrument cluster as well. Not essential, it doesn't look like, for this job. Actually, yeah, it's gonna be, because bolt down there to split the tractor. But I also took it apart just because the hydraulic line that's leaking, you gotta get access to it way back into there. There's the fittings right back there, so probably gonna have to take out the column assembly to do that. But yeah, getting the instrument cluster out was actually fairly straightforward as well. This is the hour meter tachometer cable, so it actually is directly connected to the engine, and that little spline drive in there, I don't know what it's called, but it's just like a flexible line that actually attaches to the engine right there. So as the engine's spinning, that little cable in there spinning, which is connected to the back side of the tachometer, and that's what reads your RPMs and as well as your hours. So sometimes if your hour meter is not working, that's probably the first issue. If it is a mechanical style hour meter, look into the cable. But if not, I mean, it's not uncommon for these to go bad, but this one works, so that's cool. Yeah, so I guess the next thing, since it is a 4-wheel drive, we'll need to disconnect that drive shaft, because we're taking this bell housing where it connects to the transmission. That's what's called splitting the tractor. Those two can come apart. So basically the front wheels are going to roll away and the back half is going to stay where it is. So it's actually it seems complicated, but it's actually pretty straightforward. Yeah, so I got the panels, also disconnected the battery. Want to do that so you don't get any shorts as you're disconnecting electrical, because there is going to be an electrical connection between your instrument cluster and coming into the front of the engine. So this was also weird. Found some, I think they're mud daubers, and they're actually the larvae are still alive. I didn't really like that, so I'm gonna clean those boogers up and get rid of them. But other than that, yeah, we'll keep going. See you in a second. So it looks like, get this drive shaft off. This cover here is probably where the splined input's gonna be. So, looks like a few 10mm bolts. Zip those off, and it should come off, and we'll see what's underneath there. 8 bolts later, got it off. Make note of the bolts. There are actually 2 different kinds. 6 of them are going to be longer, and that's actually what goes on the bottom side, the bolts do. And then 2 of them are shorter, and they actually attach up to the front differential to, I don't know, keep the covers secured there as well. So there's the covers, there's the bolts. We'll organize those, but this is what we're after. If you can kind of see a little dark underneath here. But one of these we're going to have to take off, maybe even both, but they actually look like they got a circlip or some type of locking ring in there, and then it looked like there's a pin right there. There's a pin that we'll have to drive out, and then we'll be able to get this assembly off, because you can't have these attached when we go to split the tractor. So go there next. This is all I'm doing, is just got a flathead right here, and there's that pin. I'm able to actually just get underneath it and get that clip off all the way around, and she's off. Here's the clip. So not sure what, oh, it's just a, I'll have to get a skinnier screwdriver. It's actually just a floating pin, so just push it out. There it goes. All right, so I got both sides off. Clips are here, so just make sure you don't lose them. They're captured right now on these spline shafts, but yeah. So this one actually, while I was touching it, came right off. So as you see, those shafts are splined, and they interface with each other. Those holes, you got to make sure when you're lining it up, that hole lines up with that hole. But that actually came off very easy. Usually, sometimes you have to get a mallet and pound them, because they will kind of corrode themselves and stick to the splines. So that was very easy. So this will just hang down. You can get a zip tie or something like that. If you're going to tie it up, you got to make sure it's somewhere on the back half of the tractor. But letting it hang's not going to hurt anything, because it's just a U-joint up there. So, yeah, we're going to go on to the next one. And I just kind of wanted to point this out. In no way, shape, or form do you have to follow these steps exactly how I'm doing them. I just see a direction and I go with it. There really isn't, you know, it isn't written in stone of how you have to do it. So I guess the next one, since I'm looking at it, the hydraulic hose going to the hydraulic pump. If you're not familiar with tractors, hydraulic hose, hydraulic oil is stored in the transmission. So that's the dipstick right there. So the transmission is also the hydraulic reservoir, and they share the same fluids. So usually on a tractor, somewhere there is a coupling, like that one right there, that is designed so that this hard pipe is going to go forward with the front half, and this is going to stay with the back half. So they put a brake in there, so people, when they have to at some point do a transmission or just split the tractor in half for something, it makes it easy. So you're gonna have to drain the oil, because once you undo that, if you don't, it's gonna spew oil everywhere. So I actually have this bucket here for the power steering leak, even though it really didn't do a good job at catching anything. We'll have to find the drain plug on this thing and pop it. So give me a second. I'm gonna go look for it, be back. All right, so found the drain plugs. It's kind of confusing, but they're all the way back here in the rear differential. There's 2 on each side. Usually do that because there's a low point on each side. So if you want to completely drain your reservoir or your transmission of hydraulic fluid / trans oil, pull both of those plugs. Also, it's good practice to do that because if, like this thing was stored outside, I have a sneaky suspicion when we pop those plugs, we're going to see some water coming out, especially if that dipstick that I showed you. These can and will get cracked over time, and this is a big source usually of where water will come in if they're sitting outside. So it's always just good practice to pop both of those and yeah, let the water and oil come out of them. So we're gonna do both of them, and I don't know what size those are. I'll figure it out here in a minute. All right, we're on the bottom side. So I guess while I'm down here, I'll tell you something interesting, weird. But if none of you really know, even though this is a Cub Cadet, American company, based out of Cleveland, Ohio, it's actually the MTD group, I think. But this little tractor is actually made in Japan, like a lot of these little ones. So usually it's metric all the way through it, especially on the engine. And yeah, surprisingly enough, what is this? 15/16 open-ended wrench actually fits that that drain plug actually fairly well. So that's what I used, and I got it loose. So this bucket probably is going to be too small, or it might just be perfect. I don't know. So I'm only going to pop one side real quick and see how far we get with this bucket. And if it's too much or too small, then we're going to have to just get a new bucket. But I already broke it loose. And it's probably going to be burping because I did not open up the dipstick up top. So unless this thing's got a crank, or excuse me, a vent on the rear, which usually these cases do, it's probably going to be burping. But if it doesn't, let's see. All right. Surprisingly, not a whole lot of oil, or excuse me, water. Looks fairly clean. This is one of those magnetic drain plugs. So that's, I mean, for a tractor, $1,500, it's not bad. I mean, I have a feeling that this has probably been changed at some point, hopefully. But when I was shifting it through the gears, it seemed fine. And I guess I really didn't explain why we're doing a clutch, and that's because the clutch is no good. This tractor was able to move fairly well in first gear, low range, because this is a 3-range tractor or transmission with 3 forward and 1 reverse in each range. So it technically has 9 forward gears and 3 reverse gears. And once you put it in the second gear, low range, it would start slipping pretty bad. So, I mean, it's 1,500 hours. I highly doubt it's been taken apart. So it's due for it. Tractors like these with loaders, they usually get, the clutches usually go pretty bad quick. If you're using a lot of loader work. But we are getting pretty full up there. So I have a feeling I'll have to change this bucket out. So I'll be right back. Boy, was she close. But I was actually able to get all of it in there. Saved you the hassle, trouble of watching it, but I pulled that other plug as well, cleaned them up, tightened them back in, and surprisingly enough, I didn't make too much of a mess. So there was that power steering hose definitely leaked a lot of fluid when I was trying to drive it up on my trailer. So it's actually so bad that you couldn't even turn it to the right. So I had to use the bucket to lift the front end up. And then once I got the weight off the front wheels, I was actually able to turn the tires to make it kind of line up. But I mean, she lost a lot of fluid. So that's probably why we were able to get it all in there. I'm not sure how much the transmission holds. If I had to guess, it's probably like 3.5, 4 gallons. But we'll see when we go fill it back up. So got the oil drained, and now we'll go and split that hose that I was showing you a little bit ago. Be right back. All right, so I dumped the oil that we drained out of the transmission Like I said, I don't know, it looked like 3 gallons or something like that. I think that's what this bucket is, but not saving it. Don't know how old that oil is. It looked a little dark, so we're gonna toss it. So that's why my bucket is dirty. But I mean, if you just recently changed your hydraulic transmission oil and you got to do one of these jobs, then you could probably save it. But because I just got this and don't know the condition of it, it's gone. So I did take off the clamps. It was a 9/16 worm clamp. I don't think these came with the tractor. I think someone put these on because they're definitely a little bit big for this tractor. And just looking up here, this is the ones that they have that came from, these are definitely from factory because they don't even look like they've been touched. So probably had these style down here, and possibly someone had replaced them, but I'm just guessing. I don't know. I took them off though, so you might have something different than what I have, or you might have the same. But I did go around with a screwdriver where it seals along the pipe, because this is a steel pipe and that's rubber. It was pretty stuck on there, so that probably means it's never been replaced or taken off, I mean. So just be careful though, because it is a little bit older. You don't want to split this. A lot of times you can definitely still reuse them. So have your bucket ready, because there's still going to be oil left in this line. And I mean, it's a good size, like 1-inch pipe. So it's definitely going to spew out pretty good. So I might need 2 hands for this. There she goes. So yeah, because I broke that seal where the rubber interfaces, or I mean goes around the steel pipe, it was easy. I mean, I was able to rotate it and I just pushed it backwards, and it's gonna stay like that. So let it drain out. We'll go on to the next thing. I'm not too sure what that's gonna be, so when I come back I'll tell you what it is. So again, this is in no particular order. So I just saw, I guess, what's the next easiest thing, and that's disconnecting the electrical. Just little push tabs, push that down and it pops out. So that's the flasher unit up there for the flashing beams on this thing, but they don't work. Probably burnt out bulbs. A couple more connectors from what is the instrument cluster. So again, you gotta disconnect these because the tractor's getting split in half. And again, these manufacturers usually have it set up this way so that it's just split connectors. So got a couple more here that we gotta pop out. Get your finger underneath there and come on. I'll probably need 2 hands for this, but you get the gist of it. Got these 2, actually 3. I didn't see that one hiding back there. So 3 on this unit. I don't know what it says. Oh, of course, when I rubbed it, the writing went away. So some type of relay module, and then 2 more here, and there's another one that goes around, goes over here. So I got to figure out where those go. But we'll just keep going at it and getting them all apart. So I will say, just want you to be mindful. This module here, again, I don't know what it is. I'll at some point figure it out. It's probably for the glow plugs, judging by the size of the wires coming out of it, because glow plugs are going to draw quite a bit of current, so you need some bigger cable for it. But the wires, it's probably not a huge deal, but I'm going to take a picture. If you can see, the connectors are very similar. They're actually the same. So you could possibly flip-flop them, and if this is particular circuit, it's not going to like it. So I would just take a picture of the orientation of where these are going, just so that you don't get yourself in trouble. This back one is completely different, so you won't mix that one up. All right, so this wire this wiring loom continued back through the firewall. It's weird, it kind of did like a horseshoe, but it comes through here, through the firewall, and it looks like we got some more. So the fuse panel is actually underneath the hood, so that's what that connector is back there. This is another connector, or excuse me, this is for the fuse panel. This is for a module of some sort up there. Relay timer, maybe? I don't know. Then we got a couple more. One for the fuel solenoid shutoff. This is actually what shuts your engine off. Just stops the fuel from flowing into, or excuse me, stops the injection pump from pumping fuel, which kills the engine. And a couple more. So I'll probably forget wires as we start getting to splitting it actually and moving the halves across from each other. So just be weary as you are splitting it, watching out for those things. But I did find a couple more. Looks like temperature sensor and the glow plug wire, glow plugs wire. So actually that previous connection down behind here, that's what that is, because that wire is the same one that I saw, which is a black with a red stripe. So probably a little like 7-8 mil underneath here that I gotta loosen up and take those off. So be right back. So I got these connectors off. That one, that one, that one, that one. There's another one down here, which is the oil pressure switch, sorry, but oil pressure switch right there. So just a spade connector, pull that one off, temp sensor's off, and the glow plug. So there's only one connection to the glow plugs, and then it just jumpers to the next one, which is back there, and then there'll be another one way back there because it's a 3-cylinder, so one per cylinder. But I just used some needle nose to loosen up that little nut because it's pretty small and they don't torque them on there that tight. So there it is, and there comes the wire. Again, while you're doing this, make sure your battery is disconnected. So the ground is not even on that terminal, so we're good. Because again, I mean, you could inadvertently leave the ignition switch on or something silly, and if this were to be live anytime or anywhere it touches the ground, it's a lot of current going through there. So yeah, things will get hot and possibly a fire. So just be safe and smart about it. So we got the electrical done. So this is kind of where it comes through. I'll have to snake it. I don't like that view. I'll have to snake this loom through the firewall. And just again, be mindful of how the wires are ran and where they're ran. Like right here, this one comes up from the backside. So just remember it. I'll have to cut that zip tie. But just so you can make it look nice and tidy when you go to put everything back together. So we'll get this cut, pull that loom out, try to pull it through the firewall. We'll probably deal with it when we go to split the tractor, but for right now, at least the connections are done for. There's a few more things we'll have to do. Here is your throttle cables. There's two, because you got your hand throttle here and your foot throttle. So foot throttle, and then the hand throttle is going to do the same thing. So you just loosen up one of these nuts. Don't do the other one, because if you do both of them, you're going to lose the position, because these are kind of set in a particular spot so that it takes up some of the slack. And these ones are actually in good shape as far as adjustment wise. So I'm just only going to loosen up, I don't know, whatever one I get to, probably both these sides. And they have little slits in them. So what you're going to do is you're going to pull back the wire, and it's the cable that's going to come out of that little slit right there. So we'll do that next. We'll have to take off those springs too, because they are attached down here. And it looks like, because this thing's got a big eyelet here, looks like we will have to take off that bolt right there, because that eyelet this is probably covering up a hole, which is clever. So we'll go there next. So yeah, so I got that screw and nut taken off, and you can see right there, focus. But that is gonna, once I get that spring off, that's gonna come out through there. But interesting, I found this. So that is an electrical, like spade style connector that someone crimped onto this throttle wire. Probably broke the end off, because usually what I've seen in the past is they will have kind of like a set screw style, where it's a little barrel that has a hole in it that you'd stick that wire through, and then on the top side will be a screw that you lock it down with, and it keeps it from pulling out through this. So that must have broke or fell off at some point, and that was someone's solution, which is actually, again, pretty clever. So I'll have to get some side cutters, dikes, whatever you want to call them, cut that connector off, because I cannot cut that wire because there's not much left, and I want to save it so that we don't have any issues and I can put it back together. So honestly, I'm probably going to do that style. I might have one of those barrel connectors, which is the more proper way around, but locally they're kind of a pain to source, and so if I want to go that route, I will probably just buy some offline, but most likely I'll do that one because that looks pretty darn good, honestly. So be right back. I'm going to get this one. I got loosened up, so all you would do, see, pops off. And so the spring, unhook that. And the nice thing is you kind of know which one is which, because this one can only go through that hole. That's what that hole's there for. So you won't get them mixed up. I've worked on tractors before where they are identical. And so if they need to be in a proper position, just be mindful of it. But I don't see why they would need to be. I don't know. Doesn't matter. Just remember where they go. I'm going to loosen this one up, cut that off, move on to the next thing. All right, I couldn't help myself. As I was trying to get this wire loom out through the firewall, one of the connectors was kind of getting hung up. I probably could have gone at it and gotten it through, but since I'm still contemplating on whether to paint it or not, I said, screw it. We're going to take off the hood and this other instrument panel, I don't know, some type of tin. But yeah, it's actually pretty simple. It's 4 bolts. So one back there, those 2, and then another one right there. It's actually fairly loose. I think really the only thing holding it up is this hood prop. That's going to stay with the core support. So I'm going to put these bolts, by the way, this is just a little trick. I bought this a while ago, and it just helps me kind of keep things organized and all in one spot, the bolts wise at least. What I do is, if it's actually very extensive and a lot of bolts, I'll just get a piece of paper, write down what the location is, and then if, like in this bin, was the front diff cover, or excuse me, the input cover, I will like label, you know, what bolts what, but this one's gonna be fairly easy as far as there's only a few bolts we're gonna have to take out, so I don't need to do that for this one. They'll all kind of line up where they need to go. So I got this loose, like I said, it's ready to come. I just need 2 hands in order to get it off. So I'll take off this and I'm going to set it aside. My little parts pile is slowly growing. I'm going to try to keep this area clean as possible because this front end's going to roll up. I'll need at least 3-4 feet just to make it comfortable to work on the clutch and whatnot, but we'll get this off and see what's next. All right, I got it off. Like I said, I was going to try to keep it clean, but I'll get that located somewhere back in my garage. But actually, it's kind of nice now that I took that off. I wasn't really planning on it, but it'll make it easier to paint, as well as it actually gives me access to where the hydraulic line is that is leaking for the power steering. So if I move the steering wheel to the right, you see it coming out. It looks like this bolt here, bolts into the engine, is caused it to rub, or had that hydraulic line rubbing on itself, and it probably chafed a hole, and that's why it's leaking. And so it'll be much easier to get to. I actually probably won't have to flip you around. Well, you're probably gonna be backwards, sorry. I'm gonna have to take off that hose. I'll inspect the top one, see if anything's going on with that one. If it's kosher, I probably won't replace it since it doesn't need it. But yeah, so much easier to look at the tractor and see what all needs to be done. I probably needed to do that hood and fascia, whatever, other piece off because it's going to allow us to get access to the bell housing bolts. So they go around, some on this side, and then you flip flop over here. There's gonna be one tucked up in there, so somewhere in there. But yeah, I'll get that, and we'll go on to the next thing. It's actually funny, in order to get this tractor split anyways, kind of backing up, sorry. These lines will have to come off, so they probably would come off from down there where they hook up to the power steering cylinder. But because we got to replace it, I'll get that one off and unhook it from up here and go from there. So cool. All right, so started taking out the power steering lines. Like I said, if you're splitting the tractor and you don't need to replace a power steering hose, then take it off from down there, because when you go to reassemble and let's just say you happen to have a leak because you didn't tighten it up all the way, it'll be much easier to do it there than it is up here. So this was, I don't know, I used a 19 mil. 18 would not fit. A 19 seems to be slightly big, so I might be wrong in that some of the stuff is actually SAE. But a 19 did all right. It didn't really damage it too much. So I got the other one loose, so I'll get it unloosened here. So be careful, keep it clean back there. I got some caps I'm gonna throw over top of those because you do not want those to get dirty. But as we can see, so this is the top hose. This is for your left steer, so I'm gonna make sure I label those accordingly because they gotta go back in the right spot. Thankfully though, if I do get them mixed up, I can just switch the lines down there and crisscross applesauce will be steering the right direction. But this was the bottom one that got rubbed through, and as you can see, yeah, that's no good. So it looked like it was rubbing up against that corner right there, and I mean that caused some substantial damage to it. Not a good area for it, so I might take a flap wheel or a grinding disc before I put this all back together and knock that edge off so that it doesn't happen in the future, because that's just, I don't know, it's stupid. Could have been avoided. I mean, it made it 1,500 hours and these look like original hoses, so I guess that's good, but at the same time, this tractor is not that old, so these should have had a lot more life to them, or at least this one should have. The other one looks perfectly fine. Nothing wrong with it. I mean, they did put some of that anti-chafe coating on it and it stopped it for a little bit, but yep, we'll get those pulled through. I'll put the caps on the steering mechanism. I really don't know what it's called. If it's like a, yeah, I don't know, but basically your hydraulic fluid comes through here, and as you turn your steering wheel, it's going to manipulate the fluid and it'll push that cylinder, blah blah blah. So, but yeah, we'll go on to the next one. All right, so the next thing I did remove was, this looks like a, I don't want to call it a case drain, but similar to that. Basically some extra hydraulic fluid, at least this is what I'm pondering or gathering. Some hydraulic fluid will gather inside of the steering mechanism, whatever it is. And so this just drains out. It's not like under pressure or anything. So I disconnected that because it kind of loops through and it would impede splitting the tractor apart. So I just shoved the rag in the end of it and let it kind of hang off there somewhere. Yeah, whatever. So now we can kind of start seeing what we're going to have to start taking apart to get the bell housing pulled off. So there's a bolt, there's another one obviously on the opposite side over there, and a couple of like this one. I don't know, I gotta count them all up, but they are gonna be different sizes. This one looks to be like, I don't know, I hate guessing, but 14 or 16 mil. That one's probably an 18 or a 19, but I'll get the sizes for you here in a second, and we'll have to start splitting it and going to town on it, and I'll start showing you where the bolts are. Give me a minute. All right, so coming back, I got the other bolt that I was just showing in the last clip on the other side. Got that one taken off, but it's 17 mil. It was on there pretty darn good, so I had to get out the breaker bar. And majority of them look like they were going to be 17, so that one, and typically it's mirrored, so on the other side in very similar locations, probably 2 more over there. But the starter, which just looking at it, looks like it goes through, so that's a 14 mil. And then there's one back there, and it's either only bolted through here, or it's actually connected to the transmission bell housing. So I am going to see if just loosening this one, taking that one out, if that is going to allow us to split it. But most likely that starter might have to come out. But yeah, and then there's a couple of 14s down here in the lower one there, and there's another one on the other side. But yeah, I know I might be jumping ahead a little bit, but that's okay, because I know for a fact I have not taken off the fuel hose yet, and obviously there has to be a fuel hose because the tank's there. So somewhere is a fuel hose and a return, fuel supply and a return. So those will come off, and hopefully that is it. Actually, I take that back. There's this hose too, I just saw that, and that is actually the power steering supply. So there's actually 2 different pumps on here. This is your main hydraulic pump for operating the 3-point and supplying power for the loader joystick control. And this is your power steering pump. So yeah, they just have them separate, but I'll get this hose disconnected too here in a minute. But I'm going to work on getting all these bolts out. So just go around. I broke these 2 loose already. Those weren't too tight as those 2 top ones, but get them off and we'll start showing you some loose bolts here in a minute. Well, what did I say? I knew I was going to forget something while I was crawling underneath here. Was getting to those bottom side bolts right there. 14 mils, those 2 are. For getting the split commenced, or started, whatever. Yeah, I mean, I kind of forgot that I hadn't unhooked any hydraulic lines for the rear of the tractor. So this is the priority valve, as it's called, and this is basically, so this loader, if there was no loader attached here, this valve most likely would not be here. It's added because you have to split, since the hydraulic pump only has 1 pressure output, you need to split those off. And this priority valve is designed so that it will be able to allow that split to happen, so that you can have some pressure, or you can have some hydraulic flow to the loader, and then you can have some hydraulic flow to the 3-point attachment. So this little selector switch, I actually don't know what this is about. I don't know if it's if it will give more pressure, less pressure, or I think it's actually mostly just flow. So I don't know what that one's for, but regardless, there's a hydraulic hose here for this one. And again, let me preface again, this might be completely different compared to your Cub Cadet 7300, because this is not a factory loader. This was an aftermarket loader, an Allied one, so you know, it was put on here aftermarket, and it wasn't designed. I mean, they retrofitted it for this tractor, and they did a good job on it, but it's not the exact loader that would have came from Cub Cadet. So you got this valve, or excuse me, this hydraulic fitting here that needs to come off. I already cracked it loose. While I was doing it, it actually, this fitting was starting to back out from the manifold, so I had to get another wrench, hold it there, and then crack this compression fitting. Pop that one off, and then there is another one right back there. So that fitting right there, that nut there needs to come off. That one's actually like a banjo style, so it's actually a bolt that goes through that. This guy right here goes through it, and so there will be a gasket on each side in between the block fitting where the nut is and on the back side of that manifold of the priority valve, whatever. So I'm gonna get that loose. I sprayed it down with some brake cleaner because you want it to be clean. It's a hydraulic circuit, so make it clean. This one, I got it cracked, but I'm gonna wipe it down a little bit more and have your drain plug or drain pan ready because fluid will come out. Be back shortly. Oh, before I leave, the other thing too is the fuel lines. Return pressure. Disconnect those. I wanted to add real quick before I pop this line off. If you don't, it's actually, this point is lower than I think, because you can see the bottom side of the tank where that little, you can kind of see the little line of light over there. So it is lower than the point of the diesel tank. So there's a valve on the back side of the tractor right here, where is your fuel filter. Even though it does actually have a fuel pump too, which is nice. So it's not just relying completely on gravity, but you can turn that switch off, or what I have, this is like my junk drawer here. These little clips from Harbor Freight actually work out pretty well. You can put that around the fuel line and it clamps it off and it keeps the fuel from spilling out. But I got that valve shut off, and I'm just gonna hang this line high somewhere over here on this side since it's gonna stay with that half of the tractor. The other thing I want to preface too is as you're going around, you know, sorry, I'm kind of jumping around a little bit right now, but this is because this is the first Cub Cadet I've worked on. So I've never really, I'm not familiar with this one too much, but I mean, the premise is the same, split in almost any other tractor. But keep some of these bolts, like break them loose, but don't take them out because I don't have the tractor supported yet. So we're gonna have to support this end and we're gonna have to support this end, because once you split it, this is gonna wanna plop down, this is gonna wanna plop down. So I'm gonna get some jack stands underneath here. This side, we'll actually put it on a jack because we're gonna be rolling this, but this side over here, I'm gonna put it on jack stands. So somewhere underneath here, like on the transmission case, I'll put a jack stand and make sure it's nice and level, because you wanna make sure it's nice and level. Keep the same plane going so that it pulls apart very easy. And then as well as when you go to put it back together, it goes together fairly easy. There's always a little bit of a struggle sometimes. But, yeah. So keep a couple bolts, like at least one on each side together so that it doesn't try to walk away from you. But I'm gonna work on getting the fuel lines done first, and then we'll resume taking the bell housing bolts off. I did get that line back there disconnected. Not a whole lot of oil came out, and then this one's disconnected too. But what it is the tube, this tube here actually extends a little bit into the fitting, so hasn't come out yet. But when we split the tractor, it will come out, and we'll definitely get some oil coming out of there. But be right back. All right, so I got a little bit ahead of myself as far as getting everything set up, and I didn't really bring you along for that because tough to do with one hand. But essentially what I got going on, I got a jack stand, or a jack supporting the back half of the tractor and one supporting the front half of the tractor. As you can see, so I did loosen up the bolts, and that fitting, or excuse me, that hose did come out of the fitting, and there's actually starting to become a crack. The bell housing and engine are starting to separate already. You can kind of feel the tension as I was loosening the bolts off, but I got those two off. I got this guy, its sister on the other side, and there's two like that on the other side. The two 14 mils underneath there are gone. Yeah, this thing's leaking oil too, so it is what it is. It's very difficult to keep it clean. But yeah, I got those out. You can see 3 holes there. One, two, 3. And I did, so it looks like, I think, because I see a crack developing right there. It's tough to see without the light, but I only had to loosen up this bolt. But there was a nut on the backside because that is not a threaded hole. It's, so I loosened up or took the nut off, and I have this loose. It's kind of still tight. I'm going to keep backing it out, but I don't think we need to remove. Where the heck is it? There's another bolt somewhere, but I don't think we need to remove it. Oh, right there. I don't think we need to remove that because the crack's already here. And if this was holding this to the bell house, to the transmission bell housing, I don't think this crack would have developed. So I don't think we need to get that one taken out. But we'll keep going. I'm going to pull this one. So you can see what's happening though is that the crack is bigger up here, or excuse me, down here than it is up here. So what that's telling me is that it's bending like this. So it's kind of spacing it out from the bottom side. What you want to do is I am going to probably jack the front up. So raise this jack up a little bit more to make that gap even all the way around, because it's going to be very difficult since it's bending down now. It's putting pressure on the input shaft for the transmission. It's putting pressure on that shaft, so it's going to be difficult to split it. So if you get that leveled out, it makes it a heck of a lot easier splitting the two apart. So let me do that, and I'll bring you back when I start getting this thing spread apart. All right, so that was fairly easy. As you can see, there's daylight. So it is starting to split. So what I actually had to do, it wasn't this jack that was keeping that spacing even, or keeping it from being even. It was actually the back side. So the back half of the tractor was bowing like this. So I just gave that back jack a pump, and you could hear it starting to split from the top, and it made it nice and even. So what I did from there then is I just put a little flathead, give it a twist, and it starts separating it. So hopefully you haven't gotten this far yet, because I did forget to preface one thing. You need to block it. So the front half of the tractor, this axle is solid, right? And it actually pivots here, where that little castle nut is back there. So this front half of the tractor moves like this. And when you start splitting it, and there's probably some dowel pins in this bell housing that help align the front half of the tractor with the back half. Once it gets past those dowel pins, it's going to want to tip one way or the other. So right now, this block that I put in here, there was about an 1/8 inch of a gap, so it did kind of fall down a little bit, but this block is keeping it from falling down all the way, because this engine would tilt, I don't know, let's just say 20 degrees or so, and it might be a little unweary for you for the first time, but it's going to help keep everything balanced on the jack as well. So make sure you get a block. I put one on each side because you never really know which way it's going to fall. Ideally, you'd use like some type of wedge so that it's very firm and it keeps it completely upright. But I mean, I was okay with that inch gap, or that 1/2 inch gap, or 1/8 inch, whatever it was. So it fell a little bit, but it's going to make it a little bit trickier. As you can see, that bolt right there no longer lines up with that hole. So I'm going to have to, if you're looking at the front side of the tractor, I'd have to rotate the assembly slightly counterclockwise in order to get those to line up. And I've done this before, so I'm kind of aware of that. But for your first time, it might be a little difficult. So that's why using wedges to keep it completely upright before you separate it is a lot easier. Sorry, that was kind of a lot of explaining, but kind of an important part, and I kind of breezed over it. Sorry. All right, be back in a minute once I get it fully apart. Oh yeah, before I go, because I'm gonna start completely pulling this front end up the forward, and I don't really have a tripod to do this yet, But as you see, this is the wiring harness, so this is going to want to start coming this way since it's still attached to that side and it's free from this side. So just do it nice and slow so you watch out, because there might be something that you forgot to unhook. So do it nice and slow. If you start feeling resistance, stop, take a look, see if something is kind of binding you up. But you know, the only thing, ideally if everything is completely disconnected, the only thing that would probably bind you up is not having the two halves level with each other. If they're not level with each other, that input shaft's going to drag and it's going to make it very difficult to pull it apart. So make sure that gap right there, that gap is even all the way around, because that tells you that you're that you're level with each other, and it will just slide right out. I usually get like a pry bar or something in there and just start scooting them apart. It's very easy. So yeah, so we'll start splitting it. Again, be mindful of wires, hoses that you may have not disconnected. Those will keep you from pulling it apart, so just give it a good once over before you start doing it. All right, so as you see, I'm not much further than I was just a little bit ago. And again, that's because this is my first Cub Cadet ever working on, and so there's always probably gonna be something that you'll forget to move or gets in the way as you start moving it. And I found out it was this bracket. So this is your kind of clutch hold mechanism. So most tractors will have these. If you're storing your tractor for a long time, you put that in and you clamp it over, hold your clutch disengaged so that it doesn't stick to the flywheel. Well, it's connected to this half, but it's touching the bell housing and keeping it from moving. So I got to loosen it up from here to get it to get off. The other thing too that I noticed, I forgot to do this, is I'll have to remove these hydraulic hoses because they're still attached to that block. So 1, 2, 3 of them, these guys, those have to come off because there's not much hose here, and I'll probably only get it maybe a foot, and then they'll start getting taut, so they need to get removed. So I'm gonna do that too in between the next clips. I'll be back in a minute. Have those disconnected. I'll have that bracket, and hopefully this thing will have a nice hole in between the two halves. And we're apart. Of course, I forgot another thing, but I didn't really feel like shooting it because I pointed it out already in the video. But me, big dummy, just wasn't listening to myself, forgot the power steering supply. So that, I got it maybe about another inch apart, and it bound up, and it was pretty apparent what was the issue was that. So disconnect that. Actually, I want to put a cap on that. Oh, of course, that one's too small, but you can see I capped those guys. So I'm gonna put some tape over that. Again, you want to make sure everything, like the hydraulics and stuff, are sealed up so you don't get any debris in there, because if you do send debris through this unit, you're gonna have some big trouble. But yeah, here is the clutch assembly. Just looking at it through the side. So this is actually a dual clutch setup. That in there is your first clutch. Let me zoom in a little bit. That in there is your first clutch assembly, and that right there is your second clutch assembly. It's very difficult to see, but there is no material left on the drive clutch assembly. So yeah, it's pooched. It's got to come apart. So I'm going to start taking all this apart and get into it here in a second. So I got a little carried away and took off the whole pressure plate clutch assembly, and I took it all apart. Sorry. I just kept going and going. But essentially, real quick, this is what you were looking at. You got 6 12-mil bolts going all the way around. Those 6 are holding all of this together, right? Well, holding it to the flywheel. This is your flywheel. So what was happening is you want to keep the top bolt, kind of loosen it, but keep it threaded in. and get out the rest of them, because if you don't and you take them all off, the last one is going to cause the whole assembly to fall down. So just make sure you keep the top one in, get out the other 5, and then hold the bottom of it. And it's pretty heavy because that's all cast steel there, another cast steel, so probably about 30 pounds or so. Yeah, and it came right off. I didn't have to beat it or anything. It was ready to come off, so got it off. The next thing I had to do, this is actually your PTO clutch. So this is actually a 2-spline shaft. So this outer shaft here is for the drive, and then this is for your PTO. So it's called live PTO, meaning that you don't need to be driving the tractor in order for the PTO to work. You can have the tractor in neutral and the PTO is still going to do its thing. Yeah, so there's going to be 2 clutches. This one is in fabulous shape because there isn't really much off-on with this thing. It's usually engaged all the time, so plenty of life still left in it. I'm not going to replace it, just clean it up, get off the dust. The other thing too, actually speaking of dust, all this stuff, so I'm not sure if they still are, but asbestos used to be integrated into friction material. This is your friction material, so be careful, wear a dust mask or something like that, sweep it up and dispose of it properly. But yeah, so I got this off. This came off on itself because this is what's actually on the flywheel. So that came off, and make sure you understand orientation. This is how it goes up. So that little, I don't know, the wider part's going to be sticking towards the back half of the tractor. Yeah, so the next thing I had to do was I had to take off this, that, and that one right there. Those are 14 mil. Once I got them off, they do have nuts. Don't touch those nuts because that's actually an adjustment made to keep the spacing, because this is your friction material here, or excuse me, your wear surface, but this is what the clutch rides on, right? It's got, I mean, it's actually flat feeling. It's just got some weird wear, but it's actually very flat. I might not need to do much with this one, to be honest, which is nice. Yeah, so this is the issue here, though, is this side is completely worn. We're worn all the way down to the rivets, as you see. The other side's not too bad, but we started getting to the rivets, so it needed to go. Like I said, the tractor would drive in first gear, and the reason why it would drive in first gear is you don't need much power, because I'm spinning this, and I don't want to go too crazy, but you can actually, just by spinning that, I have it in first gear, and I'm able to move the tractor just by spinning it with my hands. So it doesn't need a whole lot of power and or friction material to move it, but anything out of first gear, it was screwed. So yeah, this is kind of as far as I'm going to go. Right now I got to get a new clutch on order. It's Sunday, so get it placed and hopefully have it here soon. But I think the only thing I'm going to really need is, I mean, these surfaces, they're not dented. They just got some just checking on them, but they're actually very flat. If you have some grooving or whatnot, but I mean, my fingernail is not even grabbing at all. It's discolored for some reason. You would need to get this machined and just a light touch on it, but this one is perfect. I might just take some Scotch-Brite to it just to clean it up, but that's all I'm going to do is I'm going to wash these things all down so that they're nice and clean. And when I get the new friction material, this is going to get slapped back in there, and we'll go from there. So I will check back in with you guys in a few more days when I get that new friction disc.